On the afternoon of October 12th, 2001, guards at Luynes prison in southeastern France watched the sky above the exercise yard with the same indifference they gave it every day. Then a helicopter appeared, low and fast, and hovered directly over the yard. A rope ladder dropped. 2 men climbed it. The aircraft banked away before anyone below could process what they had just seen. One of the men dangling from that ladder was Pascal Payet, a convicted armed robber awaiting trial for a murder committed 4 years earlier. It was the first time France had seen anything like it. It would not be the last. Payet was born in Montpellier in 1963 and grew up moving between Lyon and Marseille, cities that shaped him into the kind of criminal French police would eventually call, half admiringly, Kalashnikov Pat. The nickname traced back to November 1997, when Payet took part in an assault on an armored security van near Salon de Provence. During the robbery, a guard was shot repeatedly and killed. Payet evaded arrest for over a year before he was finally caught in Paris in January 1999, alongside an accomplice named Eric Alboreo. He was sent to Luynes to await trial, a standard regional facility never designed to hold a man capable of what he was about to attempt. Prisons are built to stop people from walking out the front door, climbing the wall, or tunneling under the foundation. Almost none of them in 2001 were built to stop someone from being lifted straight up and out through the open air above an exercise yard. That blind spot was the entire plan. Payet's accomplices hijacked a helicopter, forced the pilot to fly to Luynes, and held the aircraft steady just long enough for a rope ladder to do the rest. The whole operation took minutes. By the time alarms sounded inside the prison, Payet was already a silhouette shrinking into the sky. He stayed free for roughly a year before being recaptured. Most men, having pulled off an escape that stunned an entire country, might have considered the debt paid and the lesson learned by the institutions meant to hold them. Payet did not see it that way. Sent back to Luynes, the same prison under presumably tightened security, he began planning again. Except this time, freedom wasn't even the immediate goal. Other people's freedom was. On April 14th, 2003, a helicopter again crossed into French airspace, hijacked and again bound for Luynes. This time, it did not come for Payet. 2 masked men rappelled down onto the security netting installed over the exercise yard after the 2001 breach. That netting had been the prison's direct answer to what had happened 18 months earlier, and it was rendered irrelevant within seconds by a pair of bolt cutters. They sawed a hole through it, lowered a ladder, and pulled up 3 inmates: Frank Paletto, Michel Valero, and the same Eric Alboreo who had been arrested with Payet back in 1999. The helicopter set down in a nearby sports stadium where a getaway car was already waiting. All 3 escapees were free. The message underneath the spectacle was unmistakable. Whatever visible upgrade the prison had made in response to the first escape had addressed the exact hole in the net and nothing about the underlying vulnerability. The sky over Luynes remained wide open. A security response built around a single, literal patch, a steel net, had solved yesterday's problem and left tomorrow's completely exposed. It took the French prison system 3 weeks to recapture the 3 men who had climbed out. Payet himself, who had orchestrated the operation from a position of trust nobody quite understood at the time, wasn't caught until months later. By January 2005, The state had had enough of half measures. Payet was convicted of murder in connection with the 1997 armored car killing and sentenced to 30 years. A sentence upheld on appeal the following year. Administrators, having watched 2 helicopters make fools of an entire regional prison, responded the way institutions often do after being humiliated, with paperwork and constant movement rather than a fundamental rethink. Payet was formally classified as a prisoner requiring exceptional surveillance and was transferred repeatedly, never held in the same facility for more than 6 months at a stretch. In late 2005, he went on a hunger strike at a prison in Metz, protesting the disorientation of 9 transfers in 30 months, and later published an open letter airing his grievances about the conditions of his confinement. In January 2007, he admitted, on the record, to having organized the 2003 escape himself, adding 7 more years to his sentence. His accomplices in that operation each received 3. None of it mattered. On July 14, 2007, Bastille Day, the one afternoon a year when French national attention is fixed on fireworks and parades rather than prison perimeters, 4 masked men hijacked a helicopter from Cannes-Mandelieu Airport. They forced the pilot toward Grasse Prison, roughly 20 minutes away, and set the aircraft down directly on the roof. Guards inside had almost no warning. The men broke through with pistols and sawed-off shotguns, moved straight to Payet's cell, as though they had walked the route 100 times before, and brought him back to the helicopter within minutes. The pilot was released unhurt. The aircraft eventually touched down near a local hospital's heliport, and the men scattered into the ordinary daylight traffic of a French coastal town on a holiday. It was Payet's 3rd helicopter escape in 6 years, and no other prisoner in French history, arguably in the world, had orchestrated anything close to that number using the same method. A European arrest warrant went out within 48 hours. Labour representatives for prison staff used the moment to say publicly what many had quietly believed for years, that men like Payet did not belong in ordinary regional penitentiaries at all, that France needed a different category of facility for prisoners whose danger wasn't measured only in violence, but in resourcefulness. It was, in its way, an admission that the system had been out-engineered. Payet's freedom this time lasted just over 2 months. On September 21, 2007, he was located and arrested in Mataró, a town outside Barcelona, along with 2 accomplices, Alain Armato and Farid Ouassou. He was transferred back into French custody on October 4th. In the years that followed, the accumulated weight of his sentences grew almost absurd in its specificity. 30 years for the 1997 murder, 6 more for the 2001 escape, 7 for organizing the 2003 escape, 5 for the 2007 escape, and another 15 for armed robberies and assaults on police committed while he was on the run that same year. Added together, the paperwork alone told the story of a man the state had tried over and over to contain with the tools it already had, rather than the tools the situation actually required. What makes Payet's case different from most prison break legends is that there was no single ingenious trick, no one clever man who beat the system once and vanished into folklore. It was the same vulnerability exploited 3 separate times, because each institutional response addressed only the last incident rather than the underlying gap. A net over a yard stops a ladder. It does not stop the next helicopter that lands somewhere the net doesn't cover. Constant transfers disorient a man's routine, but they don't disrupt a network capable of tracking him from the outside, regardless of which cell he happens to occupy that month. There is a detail investigators kept returning to in the years afterward. None of the 3 escapes required anything most people would consider exotic. A hijacked civilian helicopter, a rope ladder, a pair of bolt cutters, a getaway car parked in a stadium lot. Nothing about the toolkit was advanced. What separated Payet from every other inmate who had ever dreamed of a dramatic exit was patience and repetition. The willingness to study exactly which part of a facility's defenses had gone unchanged since the last incident, and to aim precisely there. Prison walls in France, as in most countries, had spent a century being reinforced against tunnels, against smuggled weapons, against riots. Almost none of that engineering had anything to say about the empty air 50 meters above an exercise yard. Payet did not need to break the system. He only needed to find the one dimension nobody had thought to defend, and then use it again, and again, and again, each time daring the state to finally close the gap before he returned. The 2003 operation, in particular, unsettled security officials for reasons that went beyond the embarrassment of a repeat offense at the same facility. It hadn't freed Payet at all. He was already free at the time, having evaded capture for a year and a half. Instead, he had used his freedom not to disappear quietly into hiding, the way a rational fugitive might, but to come back and extract 3 other men from behind the very walls he had just escaped. It reframed the entire case. Payet wasn't simply a man who wanted out. He had built, or had access to, an operation capable of hijacking aircraft and coordinating precision extractions on demand, a logistics network that treated a maximum security perimeter as a temporary inconvenience rather than a genuine barrier. French officials who had spent 2002 quietly hoping the Luynes incident had been a one-time anomaly were forced to accept, in the spring of 2003, that they were dealing with something closer to a standing capability than a single lucky break. The response that followed the 2003 embarrassment illustrates a pattern common to a great many security failures inside prisons and well beyond them. Institutions tend to fix the specific incident in front of them rather than the category of vulnerability it represents.